everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Shayne. I write romance and romantic fiction. And last week I got to go on a little adventure and meet an author whose books I'm currently obsessed with. I'm on my way to an author event at a local bookstore. And am I a little anxious? You bet your sweet patooties I am. I have an anxiety disorder, so yes, but it's all right because I forgot my CD. I have to go get my CD that's supposed to calm me down. I'll be right back. As I was saying, I have my CD to keep me calm. It's a 30-minute drive, and I also have fatigue, so it's going to be an hour commute once you put it all together. And by the way, this is also the day that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce announced their engagement. Oh my God, let's get going. I made it, and as I remember from before, parking was kind of sketchy, but I lucked out and found a spot. Oh, good thing I got here early. Good thing I got here early.
Interest in poisons began when I was 11 years old. My sisters and I had been sent to the countryside to avoid the foul air that was said to permeate the city that summer, bringing typhus and glandular fever with it. My father had an estate there with orchards and olive trees and a small vineyard, all of it capably managed by our aunts. It was startlingly lush to my eyes. Four Saints is on the edge of the desert, and while you can grow plenty of things there, few of them come in such shocking shades of green.
Hemlock and Silver, which is a Snow White retelling. At the event, she said that her book is for people who thought that Snow White was the least interesting part of the story and are more interested in the mirror, the magic mirror, and the poison. I got a chance to ask her, because you know I love her fairy tale retellings. So I got a chance to ask her how she goes about choosing her fairy tales, and also which parts of the fairy tale to keep and which parts to subvert or just get rid of altogether. And she said, well, that is an interesting question. And I'm like, I feel like that's like an obvious question, but maybe that's because I'm a writer and I'm fascinated by how people deconstruct well-recognized and beloved myths, because it's kind of what I do. Of course, usually by the time I'm done with the story, the original myth or fairy tale is unrecognizable. But to me, the DNA and the bones of the original story are still there. But she said that, sorry, just got with fatigue, sometimes you don't know if a wave of fatigue is going to hit you, and it hit me just now. Whew, okay. Having a lot of anxiety today too, which is unusual for, maybe it's not unusual. I'm getting ready to go out, and that almost always causes a certain amount of anxiety. So, what the heck was I saying? She said that, first off, she started talking about how fairy tales are kind of already a part of our collective experience anyway, because they're read to us from the time we're kids. And then she said that a lot of times she will just get kind of obsessed with something and can't let it go until she does her own version of it. And she said that she would read a retelling and be like, no, that's completely wrong. I can do better than that. And she said, sometimes when inspiration runs out, spite will keep you going. And I thought that was hilarious. She also, I think she said something too about that she would sometimes get irritated with how people might do a romance in a retelling. And I can testify, I can personally attest to that she does the romance right when she puts it in her stories, because the two that I have read already had a wonderful romance in them. So anyway, got my books. I got the 2 books that I had already read of hers that I love, and I got Hemlock and Silver, so I'm definitely going to be reading that in the next few months. I might read it for Gothtober, because it is a gothic, dark gothic fairy tale retelling. And yeah, I don't know how I did this. It was a weeknight. I managed to stick around long enough to get to meet her and get my book signed and everything and get a picture taken. We were both crowded in there, trying to get the selfie. I should have brought my selfie stick, is what I should have done. But didn't think of that. Didn't think of it at all. You know why? Because before, when they would have events, there would always be like a staff person who would kind of stand by and take pictures for people if they wanted, but they had no such situation. There were plenty of staff people, but none of them had self-designated themselves as like the picture takers, so we were on our own. And then when I left, it was raining. So it was dark and it was raining, so very appropriate, I think, for a book signing for a fantasy author and dark fantasy, dark fairy tale retelling horror author. I thought it was perfect that it was raining. But I still stopped at the little cafe to get my chocolate cake. They make this amazing vegan chocolate cake, and I don't ever go within proximity of that store, of that cafe, without getting a slice of that chocolate cake. So it was raining, and then I had like my 25 minute drive home in the rain and the dark. And this weird thing happened. I don't know if I was just being paranoid, but there was this car, it was a Mustang, it was like one of those old school Mustangs, that kept like hovering in the lane next to me. So this is now, I'm on a section of the road where there's 2 lanes. It's a 2-lane road. And they kept like hovering next to me and revving their engine, like doing that, you know? And then they would and they were never behind me, because it wasn't like, okay, I'm going too slow for them and they're being angry, because they were never behind me. They were always to the left of me, but they kept like revving their engine. And then even if they had a chance to like get past other people to zoom ahead, they never did. They kept either hovering beside me and revving their engine or getting in front of me and then slowing down. And I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. And if it weren't for the fact that I had just gone to this really cool book event and I was listening to my CD and singing along to August, so I was in like a nice little kind of protective haze of being in my own world, I think I would have gotten really freaked out. Because that is one of the things that triggers my anxiety, is aggressive drivers, aggressive belligerent drivers. And I tend to be, unless there's not a lot of people on the road, I tend to be a speed limit driver, which really pisses off some drivers, particularly here. But I was on the right. I was in the right-hand lane. They were never behind me. They were always beside me or in front of me. I'm like, I don't understand what is happening. Finally, got rid of them because I came to my turn. I came to the road where I would turn to go south to head home, and they were continuing straight. But it was just the most bizarre thing. I don't know what that was about, and maybe they were just doing their own thing, and I was projecting that it had something to do with me. But it was weird. But I was like just very glad that I was kind of in my own little world, because I was just like, whatever, dude. I got my books. I got there and home safely. It was a big adventure for me. These are my adventures, going to book signings and such. Thank goodness my friend found out about this print Sign of the Times documentary that was happening on IMAX, because I did not know about it, and apparently it's only happening this weekend, and we just went and saw it, and it was amazing. Absolutely amazing. First off, one of the previews was for the preview for the next Wicked, and I got so emotional. My friend was actually like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, I'm just so emotional about the Wicked preview. And then the movie, oh my gosh, it was amazing. Concert footage of songs from Sign of the Times, which is one of my favorite albums of Prince's. And Sheila E. was in full form, looking like a badass goddess on those drums. And then there were so many amazing performances, but the one that just like I need to recover from is when he did I Will Never Take the Place of Your Man in this gorgeous orange suit. Oh, amazing. Absolutely amazing. I'm looking for Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. It's a book I want to finish by the end of the year, and also for my current manuscript as some inspiration for one of my characters. And I have it checked out from the library on Hoopla, but I'm taking a lot of notes, and I want to have access to those notes like in the book after I'm done reading it, and that won't be the case once it goes back to the library. So I'm off to the secondhand bookstore to see if I can find a copy of Rebecca. I found it. I got my copy of Rebecca. I'm very excited. Only thing is, check this out. Look at this type. Look at this type. I can't. I can't. This is painful to even think about. So I'm going to continue reading the book in the Hoopla app, the e-reader, and then I will just make all of my annotations in here. I'm very excited. This is a rant. I asked where I would find authors like Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes and Ann Patry if they would be in the classics section because they're like Harlem Renaissance. And he was like, who? And I said, Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes, Ann Patry. He said, I don't know where they would be because I've never heard of any of those authors. I nearly had a heart attack. Okay, Ann Patry I can understand. But Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston? I just don't get it. To have never heard of those authors, I don't get it. What is going on? It's not okay. It's not okay. All right, let's close out this vlog with a little book haul. I got to get a few books from T. Kingfisher, or by T. Kingfisher. Not the least of which is my very own copy of Thornhedge, which actually was already autographed, which is fine. Let me find it in here. Yeah, there we go. Already autographed. And I'm a little envious because there was, oh, look at that, a little, look. There was somebody in line ahead of me who had a hardcover of this that had illustrations in it. Illustrations. Oh, it was all I could do to not just be like, can I look at that? I think it was a book she'd already had, and she brought it to the book signing to get signed. But this is the version they had at the bookstore. So that's the one I got, and I'm really excited. I'm actually really excited to be able to just reread this whenever I want. Because like I said, the afternoon I spent reading this book is now burned indelibly into my brain because it was just a magical little few hours out of my day. And then, of course, I also, because I had just finished this book, A Sorceress Comes to Call, so I had to get that one as well because I loved it and I definitely will read it again. And got her to sign it on the side there when I went through the line. I'm really proud of myself for sticking it out long enough to get through the line and be able to meet her, because that was a long evening for me. It was on a weeknight. Usually on weekdays during the work week, I make sure that I get to bed on time every night so that I can be fresh the next day, because I do have chronic fatigue. So if I don't manage that and get enough rest every day, it becomes an absolute nightmare. So for me to be able to do this and kind of rearrange, I had planning. It's about planning. I knew that I was going to go to this event because I knew about it about a month ahead of time. So I was just like, okay, that's the day that I have to kind of not schedule too much else going on earlier that day and make sure I get a good nap beforehand and all of that. And it was, gosh, I should have timed how long we stood in line, but there were a good number of people there. They they had all the seats filled, so they kept pulling out more seats, and then people who came in later had to just stand. It was a full house. It was amazing to see that. But anyway, yeah, got this one signed as well, which I'm really excited about. And I made myself stick to books that I knew that I already liked. And of course, the reason for this whole author event was the latest release, Hemlock in Silver, which is in hardcover. Look at that. It has this like green, sort of witchy green, witch's cauldron sprayed edging going on. And there is, ooh, I'm just going to pull off the dust jacket for just a minute. There is an illustration here, which is really cool. And what else? Of course, I got my little signature, autograph, and then, and then the back is also the same. So it looks like it is, I'm assuming this is the Hemlock, and then this snake is on the cover. And it looks like it's like part of like the way it's positioned. It looks like some sort of like mythical creature. I don't know anything about this book other than it is a retelling of Snow White, but focusing on like a character who's really good at identifying poisons and coming up with antidotes to the poison. So that sounds absolutely fascinating. I really love. As a matter of fact, I just realized that during the Q&A, I'm like 99% sure that she said that the person who illustrated this cover is the same one who illustrated the covers for her Sworn Soldier series. The first one being What Moves the Dead, which I read that one as well, and I definitely want to read the next two in the series. And I can kind of see it because all of those covers kind of have like this same theme of like an animal on the front mixed up with botanical images, but is actually possibly not, it might be something else that's making up the image as opposed to the actual animal itself, which in this case you can kind of see here that the snake is actually made up of a bunch of like grass and leaves woven together to look like a snake. So that's really cool. Anyway, this is probably one I'm going to read closer to October, maybe even as part of Gothtober, which I will talk about in a later video. But yeah, I gotta say, this green, this sprayed edging is pretty... I really enjoy being able to see all the pages with that green on it. It really pops. This is going to be great. I cannot wait to read this. So that was that adventure. That's my little haul from Bookworks, which is the independent bookstore that hosted the author event. And then I did want to also share this. I got my friend found these cards when we were at the movie theater for Sign of the Times, when we went to see that. I am so glad that my friend was visiting and had heard about this movie. I hadn't heard about it at all. Was not even on my radar. And I pay attention to movie openings, and I subscribe to Rolling Stone magazine, and I follow them on socials, which is where I would have expected to have heard about both movies and music. So I don't know how I missed any information about this, but my friend called me and was like, I don't care what else is going on this weekend, we gotta see this movie. It was in IMAX. It was only showing for, I think, those 3 days. I think Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the last 3 days of August. Yeah, I think it was only showing those 3 days because when we went to go, because we went at noon on Sunday, we went to the noon showing on Sunday, and my friend said that the ticket person or whoever had said that this was the last showing anywhere. Oh, to see that concert footage from when he was so young and he was at definitely at a peak in his career. Oh my goodness, it was amazing. Anyway, the other thing about Prince too, not only is he really important to me, but he's actually features in my manuscript that's out on submission right now, because the main character is somebody who was struggling to sort of get out of this repressed upbringing and really express herself sexually, and as a Black woman, and she really looks to Prince as a way, as a model, because he was not only was he an amazingly talented musician, but he really transgressed racial boundaries, stereotypes, and gender constrictions, and also had a very, particularly for this time when he first came out, had a very sort of egalitarian and very open and frank and holistic approach to sex and sexuality, including how men and women can be sexual with each other or independently, like just being themselves. And I remember when he passed away, I went to somebody that I knew here who like was a bartender at a press club and was really doing a lot of his own curation and creating his own stuff kind of around the music scene. He hosted a little like screening of Purple Rain at the club that he bartended at. And we just sat there and talked about, that was the year that a lot of people died. It's almost like they all knew something. And they're like, yeah, we don't want to be around for this. Anyway, but we both talked about how Prince really just shattered boundaries as far as what Black people could do, and also gender wise, because his look and everything was kind of feminine, and yet at the same time he was also masculine. And that was just being able to see that you can be both. You can be both anytime you want to. All that to say, it was wonderful to see this movie. Thank goodness my friend told me about it. And last but not least, I have read this book before, but it has been years and years, so I don't remember that much about it. I am writing currently a manuscript where the X is kind of overshadowing. Actually, a lot of X's are overshadowing the current relationship. And I just, for some reason, I was like, you know what? One of the X's makes me think, something about her makes me think of how I remember Rebecca being characterized. So I was like, okay, let me go read this book. Let's get started. Instead of waiting until December to read the book that I want to finish before the end of the year, why not not start a few months ahead of time. And one of the things that I think will be really cool will be to see, you know, at what point in the story is Rebecca first mentioned, and then when is she mentioned next, and just sort of see how that pacing is of dropping in these little hints of this antagonist. Anyway, I was filming myself being all happy finding this book in the book aisle, and then as I was filming, somebody came into the aisle, and I'm like, whoop! So I had to cut that off. For it being like right as the bookstore opened on a Friday morning, there were a lot of people in there, so it was a little difficult to film. And also, the clerk kind of looked at I had my phone and my selfie stick kind of hanging by my side. I was trying to be all slick and surreptitious, and he kind of eyed it with, what's going on here? But anyway, got my book, and there were a lot of books, and I'm like, ooh, should I get that? And I'm like, no, girl, because you have too many books on your bookshelf. You gotta read the ones that you actually have before we add any more. Let's see what we got. So that is it for my little book adventure over the past 2 weeks. Let me know in the comments if you saw the Prince movie and what you thought, and if you heard about it and how you heard about it, because I want to know. I want to know how it is that it did not hit my radar at all until my friend called me up. Word of mouth. Word of mouth is still one of the most effective forms of communication. And also let me know of any fall books that you are reading right now. Until next time, bye!